item for all Salon people and then party them. Sierra Media will be bringing you a variety of programs ranging from documentaries to discussions, interviews, news, views, sports, and entertainment. Our programs will contain matters on development, governance, the economy, and issues that are of importance to Sierra Leone. So, no left BNO because we get Bebe program then like Salon discussion, meets the ministers, the president's hour and the Gladi program, Look Me, I Look You. All this they start soon na www.sierragemmedia.org. Now who's tem these?
As we talk about burning issues ranging from politics to the economy, culture to sport, education to entertainment, corruption to the environment, we realize the Sierra Leone story is far from finished. So, Sierra Gem Media Production brings you Zoom In. Zooming In is the program that engages everyday people, entrepreneurs, inventors, entertainers, activists, policymakers, and politicians to discuss and debate issues relating to Sierra Leone. Zooming In digs deep into the issues and stories. Zooming In ensures the debate is pushed to another level. Zooming In asks those questions that has never been asked before. So, join me, host Chumaba.
When I was young, a lot of things were different. Unfortunately, most of the differences seen now are heartbreaking and are not good at all.
Before now, men were strong protectors of the weak, fathers, brothers, lovers, sons. Their mere presence guaranteed the safety of women and children.
But what do we do now?
Men harassing and raping women.
Men sexually abuse little girls.
Men battering and killing their wives.
Any form of sexual assault, be it rape, sexual abuse, or pedophilia, is a killer to human self-esteem.
Women should stop dying in silence.
Speak now.
The rapist should be stigmatized, not the victim.
I think death sentence should be the consequence of such terrible act.
And you mothers, build confidence in your children, put trust in them, listen to them when they make reports, and take necessary actions.
Talking of mothers before now, women were virtuous.
They were mothers, daughters, and sisters.
Nurturing, counseling, supporting their men folks.
But now, women are trafficking female children for money. Women are forced to be silenced.
All this must stop, and it must stop now.
Real men do not abuse, rape, or molest women and children. It is barbaric, unacceptable.
Let all real men stand with us.
Together, let's say an emphatic no to rape, sexual abuse, pedophilia, and domestic violence.
crimes committed against a person, rape is the one that leaves the person feeling very violated. A rape victim is often left with the feeling that a part of them has been torn apart.
To use another person's body and ignore the soul that resides within is one of the most outstandingly shocking crimes that one person can commit against another.
Some men harass and rape their women.
Some men sexually abuse underage girls.
Some men beat and kill their wives.
Any form of sexual assault is unacceptable.
There must be consent before you act.
Being in a relationship is not consent.
If they are not sober, they can't consent.
Flirting is not a consent.
We had sex before is not consent.
Silence, it's not consent.
Only an informed, sober, freely given, ongoing and enthusiastic yes is consent.
Women should stop dying in silence.
A man does not become a real man by physically dominating a woman. A man becomes a real man by loving, protecting, and respecting the woman.
Real men do not rape or abuse women and children.
Let all real men stand with us. And together, let's say no to child abuse, no to domestic violence, no to all forms of rape, being it spousal rape, intimate partner rape, child sex abuse, statutory rape, date rape, serial rape, and gang rape.
We must rise up against this ugly trend.
Justice for one, justice for all.
All sexual assault must stop, and it must stop now.
I was raped multiple times by my aunt's boyfriend when I was 6.
I was repeatedly raped at the age of 8 by a close family member.
I was raped at 19. I didn't speak openly about it because I was ashamed and afraid that people would judge me.
I was raped at age 5 by my caregiver's husband.
On June 17th, 2020, 5-year-old Khadija Sakho, a beautiful little girl from Freetown, Sierra Leone, was repeatedly raped and strangled to death, allegedly by her own cousin. Her death shocked the nation. But in truth, in this small West African country, 9 out of 10 girls experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. Think about that for a second. 9 out of 10. That's 90%. My name is Aisha Sase. I'm a journalist and activist. I'm joining forces with Idris Elba and other activists from across Sierra Leone to support the survivors of sexual violence with the Survivors Solidarity Fund. Please consider donating whatever you can afford. All monies raised will go to 4 local organizations currently providing free medical and legal services to survivors. 5-year-old Khadija lost her life to sexual violence. That same threat remains for millions of others. So this is also a call for you to use your voice, your power, to draw attention to an enduring culture of rape. Together, we must end it now. My name is Aisha Sase. I am Khadija Sakho.
I am Khadija Sakho. I am Khadija Sakho.
I am Khadija Sakho.
I am Khadija Sakho.
We are Khadija Sakho.
We are all Khadija Sakho.
Our aim is to teach our pupils to be creative, critical thinkers, to be innovative, and to become the new entrepreneurs of Sierra Leone and Africa, moving the African continent beyond the 21st century.
Jobs are going to change. The nature of work is going to fundamentally change.
We
realize companies are starting to hire on skills and not degrees.
Currently, I'm a self-taught coding beginner. I develop websites and basic applications. I've been interested in science and technology since I was 11. An up-to-date STEM lab gives us what we need, the tools, motivates us to do more.
The Scholarship and Innovation Working Group from Old Boys Association has been working with both Reverend Canon Ken Davis and Canon Lashite to see how they can increase science and STEM at the school.
STEM is important because pupils can learn how to solve real-world situations and pursue careers in web development, artificial intelligence, robotics, chemical engineering, and the sky is the limit to what a pupil can do.
So a vision for the future entails computing capability that would create a STEM innovation lab to provide all students with practical, engaging, and self-learning opportunities to gain digital skills.
One of the use of the microbit is to test for science experiments. In the case of agricultural science, we want to test for the soil. You can download information about the type of soil on your computer, and then you take the microbit, download the information on the microbit.
STEM gives us the knowledge, gives us the capacity with the science, the technology, engineering and mathematics. It helps you to be able to prepare for your future, to be able to earn your place in the future workplace.
The coding club is new, and we only have a few members for now. And very soon we will have a big coding club.
Let us give the young people the tools to become critical minerals or miners of their thoughts and ideas that will develop our countries, and also for them to play their part in creating a conceivable world.
All donations are appreciated, and all funds raised will go towards the development, implementation, and management of this first of a kind digital STEM lab in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone Grammar School, empowering students for tomorrow's world.
Currently, I'm a self-taught coding beginner. I develop websites and basic applications. We had an opportunity to meet the Vice President and the First Lady. They were so surprised at what we were doing. They were excited to see that pupils in Sierra Leone could actually do what we were doing back then. I've been interested in science and technology since I was 11. I was really curious to know about what was going on behind those games I was playing. What is behind the scenes? And I was interested. I googled it up and I searched and I saw coding. So I was really curious to know what it was all about. An up-to-date STEM lab. It gives us all what we need to make us comfortable, to make us feel like we are being supported, to motivate us to do more. The coding club is new. As time goes on, more people will be interested in what coding is all about. Coding is one of the tools of innovation. Innovation is what people have been using to solve problems before. It's what we need to solve problems that we're facing now. Innovation comes in different aspects, different areas. Or one way we can innovate, or one area we can innovate in is technology. And coding empowers us with knowledge we need to innovate in terms of science and technology.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where in the globe you are located or are situated right now. Welcome to CRGM Media Platform, our Wednesday program, which we call the Big Debate, and most times the Big Sierra Leone Debate. You're welcome, and it's going to be an exciting conversation today. We have an experienced panel for you. It's going to be interesting, and most times we talk about issues related specifically to Sierra Leone, but today we're going to go worldwide because we say where it's a global world, we're all connected or interconnected one way or the other. And particularly we focus in our conversation, we're relating our conversation to the just concluded US presidential elections. It's true, and we always say that when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold, particularly Africa. So that's why it's important we have in this conversation before we say, oh, it's their business, let them deal with it. COVID taught us the lesson that it's not that way anymore. The Ebola virus in Africa, in Sierra Leone and other West African countries taught us that lesson as well. So we have to make sure we engage in the conversation, we be part of it. You may think that your contribution today might not mean much, but it helps inform decisions, policies, and so many other things. We learn from each other. That's why we're here, and we expect you to be part of the process and make your comments and your contributions. As always, my name is Juma Ba, the lead moderator for CRGM Media, and I have my co-moderator and our creative director, Sylvester Dugba. He looks so sharp in his yellow kaftan today. Hello, Mr. Dugba.
Hello, viewers, and hello, Juma. Hope you're doing fine today.
Well, today I'm not going to have anything to say. You look sharp, you look smart.
No problem. Yes, always, as always.
All right. And again, I have Mr. Obafemi Pama, our technical director. I'm not going to talk much about his dress code because look at him. He's showing off right now. Say hello to our viewers, sir.
Hello, viewers. Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. We hope you enjoy your stay with us today.
All righty. Thank you. And as always, our panelists, our viewers and followers, please keep the conversation healthy and exciting, and let's keep it clean. And we just have to ensure we respect each other's opinion. Our panelists are not saying their opinion, is what you have to go by. They're just sharing that with us. So let's respect that as well. We may disagree to agree. So let me introduce our team today. I'll start our introduction with Professor Cecil Blake. He's now retired. He was a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and he's a fellow Sierra Leonean who served as Minister of Information Broadcasting and a chief government spokesman for the government of Sierra Leone during the President Tijan Kaba era. He was also a senior official at the United Nations University in Tokyo, Japan. He's still a professor. He's still doing a lot in Africa. He's still engaged, and that's why I believe that he's one person that will benefit from today and will learn from each other. Our other guest is Susan Shepler. She's a professor as well, anthropologist and associate professor in the School of International Service at American University, with extensive experience working in West Africa, particularly in Sierra Leone. She's the author of the widely reviewed Childhood Deployed, Remaking Child Soldiers in Sierra Leone, New York University Press 2014. And her articles have appeared in a number of scholarly journals. She earned a MA in mathematics and PhD in social and cultural studies in education from the University of California in Berkeley. So you will understand why we headhunted her to come and be part of this conversation today. And I'm sorry I had to mix the crew this small. And again, we have another international civil servant, I would say, of 22 years experience working for the United Nations. Ahmed Shamsuddin Cole is a graduate from New Jersey City University with BA in political science, MA International Relations from William Patterson University, New Jersey. He worked as Deputy Director, Educational Opportunity Fund at Brookdale College in New Jersey. Worked as Political Affairs Officer in the UN for 22 years, mostly in peacekeeping in Somalia, Bosnia, Kosovo, and Sudan, and other places as well. He says he's retired. He retired since 2012, and he spends time between the US and Sierra Leone. But as far as we are concerned, Alhaji Samsudeen Cole has not retired because he's very involved in community affairs in the diaspora as well as in Sierra Leone. So if we're looking at, elderly statespeople that we see as mentors, he's one of them. And we have Professor Anne Barbara Willis, MHS, PhD. She's an associate professor and director in Global Maternal and Child Health Program, Department of Epidemiology at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, USA. And Anne is experienced in global maternal and child health and interested in politics, history, and culture, including how they affect health. She was trained at the Johns Hopkins University and has studied maternal and infant health and taught in Eastern and Central Europe, India, and West Africa. So now we see again why we have all these distinguished people in our midst today to have this conversation. We're going to open it up, and I'll say hello to our viewers. I don't know whether you want to do multi-view, Femi, or you just want to do individual. Over to you. All right.
Yes, so I've got the multi-view up.
Sorry?
I've got the multi-view up.
Okay, so here is our panelists for today. You'll meet them when they start their presentation. We're going to keep it short, sweet, and simple, and exciting. So we'll start with Susan. We usually start with a broader topic that we, to start the conversation. We ask, what must African governments learn from the just concluded United States presidential election? Over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much. Fambole Aduo, Gladi Fosiuna, thank you for inviting me. Thank you. I'm excited to be part of this panel and to hear from my fellow Sierra Leoneans and my fellow Americans thoughts on this topic. When I first heard the topic of what must African governments learn from the American election, I wanted to laugh because really, the question should be the other way around, because I think African elections have been far superior to what we just witnessed in the United States, which was a kind of travesty leading up to what is continuing to play out as President Trump refuses to step down the last few days. But I also want to reflect on some of the issues of trust in the system in the American case and in the Sierra Leonean case in particular. So I did a little looking at poll numbers, and a 2019 Gallup World Poll polled Americans and asked whether they were confident in the honesty of US elections. 59% said they were not confident in the honesty of elections. If you compare that to the most recent Afrobarometer report on Sierra Leone, done by our friends at Institute for Governance Reform, they asked questions about how much do you trust the National Electoral Commission? And 29% of people said they trusted a lot. They also asked, how would you rate the freeness and fairness of the last national election held in 2018? 63% said completely free and fair. So you see that, according to poll data, Sierra Leoneans in general have more trust in elections than Americans do. Furthermore, in that same poll, in Afrobarometer, 88.7% of respondents said that they had voted in the last election. Whereas in the just concluded US elections, we don't know for sure yet, but it's projected to be about 66% turnout. And that's record breaking. That's for 2016, it was more like 60%. And so if we're asking questions about comparing the quality of democracy in Sierra Leone and the United States, I think an argument could be made that Sierra Leone is much more serious about democracy than the United States. And I think that, I guess what African governments should learn is to push back when agents of the US government come in and tell people how to run their democracy. Because America is not the shining beacon of democracy that it pretends to be in the world. And I think that African governments in general should be prouder of what they have achieved in the field of democracy. I just want to say before I pass on to other speakers, some questions about what this democracy will likely mean for US government involvement in Africa and in Sierra Leone in particular. I mean, as we know, President Trump didn't care about Africa, in fact, called them shithole countries, pardon my language, and so was not really interested in what was going on in Africa. Although he did hate China. And so I think he was interested in the ways in which China was engaging in Africa, and perhaps that drew his interest a little bit. But when we look to President-elect Biden and what his policies are likely to be, I believe that he's most likely to return to Obama-era policies. I don't see the likelihood of much shift there. So that means things like the Millennium Challenge Corporation will still, I think, be an important way in which the U.S. Interacts with African governments and Sierra Leone governments in particular. And I saw in the news that Sierra Leone just, again, passed the threshold for being part of the Millennium Challenge program. So we know that that will be an ongoing way in which the U.S. and the government of Sierra Leone are connected. So those are just my opening thoughts. I'm looking forward to a lively debate and happy to pass on to the next panelist.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate that, and it's exciting so far. And we see Alhaji Shamsuddin Cole has been smiling. So I'm just going to pass that baton over to him to hear his view as well on that, that opening topic.
Thank you very much, Juma. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may find yourself. First of all, let me thank you guys for inviting me to this panel. I'm really pleased to be with these distinguished panelists, and the topic could not be as timely as it is, believe me. I want to thank Susan for her opening remarks. It is really mind-boggling when we're sitting down today looking at American politics, compare it to what's been going on in Africa. I have a little bit problem with the way the topic was framed, because to me, I think it should be what lesson must Africans, not the government, because number one, we don't know where this election in America is going at the moment. It's hanging. And I don't want our government to learn anything from these people when it comes to that part of the equation, okay? I want our people to learn one thing out of this, that when you participate in an election, your voice will be heard. People have to understand what is the meaning of voting. We are in this situation today in America because people came out, just like Susan said, more people voted this election than probably any other election before. Why? Because they realize the importance of this particular election, how it affects or will affect their life, their children, and their children's children. So one thing I would like to say is, our people must learn the importance of voting. We are here today because people came out under all abnormal circumstances with corona all over the place. They were determined to stay online for hours to cast their ballot. Why? Because voting is important. I want our people to understand that in the first place. Because honestly, the governments in Africa, I just pray that God will change their mind, because some of them will learn from what is going on now. Whenever there's an election, they'll say, oh, I'm not going to concede because I don't know, they stole my vote in McKinney, they stole my vote in Gambia, so I'm waiting for them to make sure they do a recount, etc., etc. And at the same time, there's going to be a lot of fight. Innocent people will lose their life because of nonsense like that. That's where I'm worried about. Because Africans are good in in copycats. They will say, oh, if America can do it, so I can do it in Africa. I mean, I will not concede because I don't think the election was fair and fair. Hell, we do not have the infrastructure like the US have that can at least predetermine what the result would be. I mean, we don't know what it will be right now, but at least we know that there's a process going on. Recounting and then certification, and then if you get to the court system. But when you talk about us, the court is being controlled by the government of the day. So there's no judge that will ever go against the sitting government in Africa. He will be kicked out in the next breath of an eye. So there's a lot that we can learn out of these pros and cons. But to me, I think the people of Africa must learn something about voter participation, because it's becoming very important to the poor, the masses. This is the only way, if possible, if democracy works, this is the only way the masses can determine their future. I will leave it there. I know I've thrown something on the floor that will be very provocative. I like that. And I know my older brother will take care of that for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alhaji Shamsu. Anne, I see you're smiling, you're nodding there. I don't know whether that's in agreement or, contention of what the previous panelists have said. So over to you. Let me hear what you have to say.
First of all, thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate it. I too stumbled upon the title and thought a little bit like what we've all seemed to be saying, which is, maybe it's what Africans as opposed to governments can learn, or maybe it's what we can learn from and about Africa, because Americans don't know a lot. One of my, I have quite a lot of thoughts. I tend to be an optimist. So I'm a little bit different maybe than Professor Shepler in being optimistic about our system and that it worked. I feel that at the end of the day, we had a lot of votes and democracy worked. There was, as Alhaji just said, a system of checks and balances that are in place. I think I'll preface some of what I'm going to say a little bit later by saying that I think a Biden presidency is going to be much more global, much more internationalist. And that's good. Well, it's of interest for both Americans and non-Americans. So for Americans, better engagement means that the average American gets a chance to learn something about many other countries that's reasonable and not just rhetoric, not just crazy rhetoric. So that's one thing. But also our aid programs, our CDC will be restored and refunded. People who lost their jobs will be able to come back. And these are career level government employees who know their jobs at the Department of State, at the CDC, at the National Institutes of Health. So I look forward to better days. And I contend that the election results are complete. I think it's only really Trump who is saying that they're not complete. So my remarks are going to reflect that I believe it's complete and Biden is president-elect.
Okay, thank you so much. And we'll go to the gentleman, Professor Cecil Blake, who also served in government so many years ago. And we want to hear his thoughts on this topic,
Thank you very much. In fact, I want to say thanks to the organization and to express my appreciation in terms of being invited to this particular discussion. And I'm very glad to be among the panelists, and the opening statements have been instructive. However, I may be the oddball here, okay? Let me fit into the panel's ethos up to this point. I agree wholeheartedly about the importance of voting. I agree wholeheartedly that for this particular election, democracy survived. I would not say that it won. What I believe won in this election was decency. Decency won. Preference for the truth won. And also decorum won. So when you look at the tactics that were used, particularly by the Trump campaign, that involved demonization and all these kinds of things, you know, vilification, objectification, etc., my shock was over 70 million people bought that.
Mm-hmm.
I was tremendously shocked because the results really were an eye-opener. Over 70 million Americans chose a campaign strategy that highlighted division, that looked askance at racism, that looked askance at misogyny, that looked askance at white supremacy. So there are these things that stuck out in this election that are fearful. And to make a case that Africa should learn from this, I think would be a serious error. Because what is going on, and I emphasize democracy survived, but it did not win. What is going on is the reification of division, the reification of demonization, the reification of vilification and objectification. Now, if African governments try to replicate this kind of thing in the form of learning, it's extremely dangerous. Because just by our composition, we are fractured, not in a negative sense. We are already divided in terms of ethnicity. In some countries, we are divided in terms of religion. Okay? You notice what religion has been doing in parts of West Africa, Nigeria, to be precise, Central African Republic. So we already have these strict divisions that exist. And here we have a system that elevates and reifies division. So I'm extremely concerned about an attitude that says that, well, American democracy or democracy in whatever formulation we want to talk about it is fait accompli, that it is the standard. It is the standard for America. It is the standard for the Western world. I have no problems with that. But I am tremendously concerned that with our propensity to copy, I think it was Halaji used the word copy, our propensity to copy, we do not look at our objective reality. We do not look at the need to use our heads, to use our minds, to come up with ideological formulations that would move our societies forward. So I have no problem with democracy as practiced here. It survived. I have no problems with it that, you know, in some Western countries. But I'm deeply troubled that we take this ideology as the standard without really looking at who we are, without really looking at our value systems. You know, one thing that stuck out here was the contravention of values in this particular election. So my position might be controversial because fundamentally I'm rejecting, outright, I'm rejecting our complacency in terms of just accepting ideological prescriptions given to us.
Right.
So that's my take in general for now.
All right, thank you so much. And viewers, you can join the conversation by asking questions, making your comments, and we'll make sure we pass them over to our panelists. Susan, during your presentation, you highlighted, you at least made some comparison with data and, the Afrobarometer, MCC, particularly for Sierra Leone, comparing that with, voter turnout in the US and the perception about, believing in free and fair elections. Also, I don't know, Professor Blake just stated that democracy survived. And I don't know, the reason why we ask the question again might be to look at, because what we noticed in Africa, possibly, for example, you have few powerful men and less powerful institutions. Mm-hmm. So if we have institutions and systems that are working, is that not something we can learn from, the US elections, for example? Because that's what, if we want to say democracy survived, that's what saved democracy today. Because, so go ahead.
Yeah, let me respond to that. Democracy survived, but just barely, I would say.
Exactly.
So I agree that democracy. I also want to agree with Professor Wallace that President-elect Biden won the election, and that will be we'll see that going forward. That these are Trump's dying, nonsense. But I think, as I said, it was dangerously close, and and so to Professor Blake's point, the real takeaway is there's a good almost half of our country that wanted 4 more years of Trump. And that's hard to believe, hard to stomach. But I think even more difficult to stomach is the way that our institutions let us down.
Okay.
I mean, you just said, Juma, that if we look at an American democratic system and we see there are institutions that are working, yeah, many of the institutions are still working. But institutions informal institutions that we depended on, like the notion that the press would be free and fair, or that the courts would rule appropriately. Norms, in particular, norms that are not written down but that are understood to be the way democracy functions. Trump and his lot violated those norms right and left. And so I think the lesson is that the institutions that we as Americans hold dear are much more fragile than we believed. Yeah. And so that may be what we need for a well-functioning democracy is to formalize some of these institutions, make the rules harder to break if we want to protect the idea that the will of the people should govern.
Okay, thank you. And let's go to Alhaji Samsu again. You emphasized on, voter participation and, citizens' engagement and involvement in the process. But elections, for example, for it to work, or democracy to work, is beyond just voting. It's not just turning out, on that day. Mm-hmm. Possibly you'll be lucky to vote in some parts of Africa. Maybe you're not. Either someone will decide to come and disrupt the elections, or for some logistical reasons you will not be able to cast your vote. So you highlighted, or Susan highlighted, pushing back. So how do you think Africans can engage in the process positively and then push their government and push the international community, particularly let's limit it to the United States, because we look at the MCC, for example, they've done all this wonderful, scorecard, and, they gave the government high score for Sierra Leone. And that the government is trumpeting that you see, if you're saying that, we have issues here, this is what the MCC say. The MCC has validated us. So then you have no say, because you will be calling on the international community, but this is already what the international community say. So how do you tie that in?
Well, first of all, let me say to Dr. Blake, I agree with you 100% about the present position of democracy, the way we're looking at it from the eyes of the US election that just passed, which is, of course, our topic. I agree with you that democracy was almost threatened, because that's why in my second phase I said that I'm not happy with the way this thing is going towards, with the way this is going towards the end, because we don't know where it's going to end. But right now, I'm really concerned about how our politicians in Africa will take this and run away with it as a copycat. They say, oh, well, if Donald Trump can delay the election or can steal the election, can do this, I can do the same. That's part of democracy. It is not. So I don't want us to even think about that. Now, one other institution that I want to give credence to is the Fourth Estate. If they had backed up upon all the criticism and all the names that Donald Trump had called them, they stood their ground and I challenge him in all aspects that the reality of our democracy must stand and must prevail. Now, the only advantage I see that, again, like I said before, that America has is that they have, as weak as their institutions might be, it is still there. We do not have it. Absolutely. I mean, name me one country where the Chief Justice would say, no, you didn't win this election, I'm going to nullify your result. He would be in jail or he would be probably disappear for life. So those are the type of institution, of infrastructure that I'm talking about, that we need. If we have solid judiciary system, even though he's been undermined right now with this present government in the US, we see what now the Attorney General is becoming the personal lawyer for the government or for the president. But at least there are people who are
court justice who they rushed through. Sorry,
but at least there are people who are voicing out their opinion and they didn't go to jail. My problem is, find the people of Africa should learn how to cast their ballot by us educating them what voting means, what you're voting for. I can give you a short story about what happened to me in 2002 when I went to contest an election. A gentleman that lived next to my house came to me the next day after I arrived. He said, oh, this is the man that's going to run. Okay, we're going to support you, blah, blah, blah. Then his wife was on her way going to work. She's a teacher. And he introduced his wife to me. So she said, okay, if you want me to vote for you, you have to give me 5,000 leons. And I asked her, I said, are you telling me that that's all your vote is value? It's value? 5,000 leons? Do you know what you're talking about? And the woman was adamant. He said, if you don't give me 5,000 leons, I'm not going to vote for you. Why? Because he doesn't know the importance, the value of a vote. If we educate our people, they go out there, and I'm not saying to vote like the way they do in America, because even some Americans don't even know what they vote for. Believe me, like Cecil said, if you can get 71 million voting for Donald Trump, you have some confused people in this country. That I agree with. But taking it from our perspective, we must try to, I'm not worried about government, because governments in Africa, forget, they are just waiting for an opportunity to stay in power till the end of doomsday. The people who are, they are the ones that I'm concerned about. They are the people that are supposed to look at the situation, not everything about the election, but the point that when you go out there and vote, your voice will be heard. People will realize that, oh, we owe an obligation to the voters, not the other way around like it is in Africa today. In Africa today, the presidents and the leaders, the government officials, so they think they own the people instead of the other way around. That's my own way of moving, because I want our people to be educated enough for them to know that the power belongs to them, not to government, not to the government officials. And if they can get that experience, that knowledge, and that awareness, and take it to the voting booth whenever there's an election, we will see some changes in Africa. I'm not 100% or even 50% happy the way things are going over here. I'm not even talking about Biden being the winner or not. I'm just thinking about the process that we are watching right now. Right. It is very, very dangerous. We don't know where it will go. Yesterday, my daughter sent some information to me about Trump supporters calling people from all over the U.S. in trucks and cars, thousands, going out to Washington, D.C. What are they going to do there?
Right.
So there's a lot that is shaky that we have to think about. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Anne. So we've talked about, and the emphasis has been on, for Alhaji Samson specifically on the people, Africans in, specific African countries to engage in the process. They have to learn something from this, not necessarily government. And we see what's been happening in Mali. We saw what happened in Conakry, Guinea recently, and we've seen what's happening in Ivory Coast. And those are all concerning issues. And it looks like it's the wave there specifically for West Africa, governments, changing their constitution for a third term, just to, stay longer in power. But in Mali, the people came out and said, no, that's not, but we saw the, regional institutions like ECOWAS coming out condemning, and backing with the government. We saw AU did not do much. So these international institutions that the people will run to, like possibly if the state institutions fail, they'll run to international institutions for help. But they are supporting a government of the day. Is there anything else you think possibly civil society organizations can do to educate the people, to engage in the process and hold government accountable to save our democracy, like how democracy survived here?
That's a lot. A lot to respond to. I think I would start with one point I want to make is about the apparent, we talk about all these divisions in the US and how divided we are. Are we really that divided, or is it just the media that tells us we are? So, for example, in this whole lead up to the election, was it more about what the media told us? They said you're divided, it's extreme left versus extreme right, there's no middle. I think there's a lot of moderate middle, and some of those, believe it or not, are part of the 70 million who voted for Trump. They simply voted Republican because they always do. I think you have to give them that breath, and that's probably all the credit I'll give. But when you talk to everyday people, which I try to do, people are just people, when you get to the core of it, you really can talk if your ears are open. And, that's a universal truth. That's not just here. But one example that is just glaring to me is the Gambia. So I was there in 2015 during the elections. There was a very high voter turnout, and obviously Yahya Jammeh was sent packing. Also, he disputed the election. ECOWAS moved in with the correct supportive statements, stood at the border in Senegal with a little tiny bit of a threat, but not, just to say, hi, we're here. And it worked. And people were very engaged in that voting process, very excited. And the partying in the streets when Barrow won was beautiful. So, that's an example where it appeared to work. I'm struck by two images I saw this week, side by side, and I wish I could find them to show you. One was that image, I think that was published in The Guardian, of Jammeh looking out of his plane, and you can see him in the window, just looking out as he's leaving. There's a similar image of Trump that I saw, of him looking out the car window with the very same look on his face. So that's perhaps just irony. But I think, the Gambia, for the moment, has shown they can do it. Now we have to wait and see what the government of Amadou Barrow is going to do. Is he really going to hold an election or not? We have yet to see that.
Okay, because you highlighting that the very African leaders who were sent to the Gambia to prevail on former President Yahya Jammeh are the same presidents today, changing their constitution to stay longer in power. Like Alpha Conde, he was the lead person there. So very unfortunate. That's why I mentioned the ECOWAS involvement in this. Professor Blake. Professor Ann just highlighted something that possibly we don't pay attention to that much, and America is good at it. Africa definitely, we see all the make-believe of the United States. That's all that is glitters is gold, the systems are working, everything is fine. And that's all been sold by the media, for example. So what did the media do right or is not doing right to undermine or promote democracy?
First of all, media systems operate primarily on the values articulated in their ideologies.
Okay.
Fundamental. Okay? So, with all due respect, Anne, may I just call you Anne? Okay? Yeah, with all due respect,
yeah.
I don't think the media tell us that we are divided. The results show us that we are divided, absent the media. The results show us that we are divided. That's number one. Number two, the nature of democracy is predicated on party politics. That's its nature. Party politics. Party politics, the mere fact that you have political parties, is a form of what? Compartmentalization.
Tribalism.
A form of division. Okay? And these political parties, we have not yet reached that stage in Africa, by the way, where the political parties are either progressives or liberals or conservatives. We have not reached that, God forbid, because it exacerbates division. So I think the problematic is this, and we are hesitant to ask ourselves the fundamental question: is this where we should be? Is this what we should do? Let me point out a couple of things that I had just now that I think are very, very interesting and instructive. And you mentioned that it was so interesting to see Gambians partying, as a result of the, process, the imposed democratic process that occurred. Well, I suspect you know Africans enough that we party even when the military comes. So it has nothing to do with political ideology. Okay?
No, that's special. It really was.
We have a coup d'etat, we all go to the street and yeah. You have a political victory, everybody goes. Look, for me, it's an aspect of our psyche, it's an aspect of our culture that I love. That even in the midst of
that's true.
Problems.
Yes, I see that.
But hey, didn't you see us Americans partying after Biden?
It is this conviviality to my mind. It is this conviviality to my mind that protected this race in the United States. Even in the, with the ants of slavery, people sang, people assembled. There was this collective ethos that has maintained. So that aspect is not related by any means to democracy. It is a human phenomenon. Now, with regard to, I've had references made to the MCC and the civil society, etc. I'm just coming from a country that says that it is really the biggest democracy in Africa, Nigeria. We know that, right? It's a huge country population-wise. Over 50% of Nigerians live in extreme poverty. Extreme poverty. Africa, in terms of poverty, we are number one in the world when you look at poverty across continents. Okay? So I asked the question, 60 years of independence, let us say, rather than seeing an improvement in the quality of life of Africans, including my own country, Sahel, what are we seeing? We're seeing deepening poverty, deepening crisis. These are all directly tied to governance. Right. They are directly tied to leadership. They are directly tied to the extent to which the leadership understands itself. First of all, as Africans, we have values We have histories that have taught us that we should not have this kind of poverty based on what our systems are. You talk about civil society. Who is paying civil society?
Mm-hmm.
Who is paying civil society? We talk about institutions that, look, I was in government. I know about attempts to build institutions.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that. And there was an attempt that I outrightly rejected as minister. Something coming from DFID, where the programs that DFID wanted to support in terms of strengthening the information sector had to be heavily dependent on people coming in from England, where we had the critical mass that can do the job. But they were sending consultants from England to do what we can do. Why? They are paying for it. Who are building these institutions we're talking about? Africans? Look at our infrastructure. Who are the people building the highways? I've traveled that continent from Cairo to Cape Town, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. And I have seen problems that are directly tied to a system of patronage, a system in which we are being nurtured not to help ourselves. So this is why I said I'm an oddball here, because I am not in this discussion to talk about democracy in Africa, its workings and non-workings. I'm in this discussion to raise questions about the lethargic mentality of Africans not to think for themselves, for goodness sake. How could a country like Nigeria have over 50% in extreme poverty? And they are dancing all over the place talking about our nascent democracy or our fledgling democracy. What about our deepening poverty?
And inequality.
Finally, international institutions. I held a senior position in the United Nations at the university. That university was a think tank. We were paid to think. Okay? And what shocked me tremendously with regard to the United Nations was how the international organization became completely compromised. This was an organization that is supposed to be international. And what eventually happened, it became so dominated by pressures from the West that as an international organization, it has something called the Democracy Fund. There is no other ideological fund in the United Nations system. So, overall, please, my appeal to Africans, stop looking outside. Number two, if you depend on people to build your institutions, they are going to control you. It's a given. It is a given. Then say na Creole, how you sell yourself, that's what the world will buy you. Not the social Shamsuddin.
That's right, you're right.
How you sell yourself, that's what the world will buy you. And the way we they sell yourself, like we not get mind, we not get intelligence, we not get nothing. A person never come on, I can't tell we how for live.
Good for now.
So I don't tire.
All right, thank you so much.
With young people, they go jump on civil society because they want $1, they want pounds, they want euros. I don't tire.
Right.
No, not tire, big, not tire.
Thank you so much, Professor Cecil Blake, for that contribution. He's clearly stating that we have to look from within and build our own institutions that works for us, taking into consideration the dynamics and our own way of life, doing things. Don't wait when who pays the piper calls the tune. It's as simple as that. That's what he was trying to say. And I see you wanted to butt into that conversation or say something. And then after that,
the only thing I wanted to add was this deepening poverty thing is also related to deepening inequality. So the extremes have become more extreme at the same time. And Nigeria is a great example of that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go to T-Boy to see if we have any contributions, questions, or comments from our panelists. From our viewers there, and then we'll do another round and then close. We don't have much time, and hopefully we'll have another opportunity someday to, get this panel again together. Alhaji Samson, I'll come to you shortly. Let me just hear from T-Boy quickly.
It's a very interesting conversation so far. Just to possibly go back to Professor Cecil's statement about what poverty is all about in terms of African countries relying on government donors or foreign donors. I have an example to make which states, if you have a child, when you give birth to a child, you allow the child to grow. You allow the child to grow to such an extent that you can support that child. And after a certain level, in terms of that child achieving a lot, you want the child to be an independent child now, to grow, to become a man or woman, and look after their own kids, not depending on the father's pocket anymore or their parental support, other than just advice. But what I see in African countries currently is the fact that we don't tend to be independent. We're saying we've gained independence 50, 60 years ago, but we're still dependent on the people who we gain independence from. So if we cannot grow after 50 years of independence, are we still taking ourselves to be kids, wherein we still need support of people who we gain independence from? Because that's how it seems like. If we cannot support our own economy, support ourselves, use our own resources to develop what we have as Africans, I think we will forever remain to be dependent. So basically, that's why we have the formation of all these institutions that are meant to be building institutions in Africa, but they are practically controlling the system of how Africans should grow and how far they should grow and how far they should become independent. So we really have to revisit some of those issues that we are always complaining about. And one thing I would like to go back to the chat room is my question from somebody who says, so they have not yet declared who's the president of America if we're still waiting and we're still hoping and still anticipating that Trump has not considered defeat. There are lots of comments and statements, more or less statements being made, and one of which says again, African countries do have institutions in place, but these are mostly compromised by powers, have to be for their own advantage. So a lot has been said, more or less statements, but I think we really have to look at some of the things that we can learn, some of the lessons. According to the first speakers, Susan highlighted something that I have some of my chat members who are actually chatting with me privately, like have a high concern to say, is it the other way around for Africans to learn the lessons, or Americans should learn lessons from Africa? Somebody questioned that statement by saying, Africans possibly have all those institutions, but they don't exist. But at least Americans have the freedom to speak their mind, even though they have issues with their democracy, but they can still say what they believe in and still express their views, which is not practically practiced in African countries when it comes to elections. So we have to look at it from both sides. I think it's both lessons should be learned from both sides of the coin, really. But I think the more lesson we should learn as Africans is possibly pick the good things that have happened, wherein we have freedom of speech, freedom of challenging things, even though we know these things are yet to be challenged, and bring in evidences of what we always say we're not sure about. Whereas in Africa, you don't need evidence. You don't need to challenge. You don't need to go to court. It's just about the clear-cut situation. You've lost, you've lost. And somebody says, imagine if Americans should actually swear in their president immediately after elections. Will we have the same situation as is right now? Because now we have to wait till January. So the process of waiting can change any dynamics in what is going to happen within the American status quo right now, as people are assuming Trump is going to compromise the security system, he's going to compromise the financial system, and he's going to compromise everything. So somebody made a statement to say it's quite better for Africans to swear in their president or their leaders immediately after elections, so they have total control of the country. Now we have to wait for another couple of weeks to be in the position of not knowing what is going to be the status of the economy, the status of the security, and the status of how America is going to be run come next 4 years. So that will be my short submission according to what I have seen through the group and which responds to the panelists.
Thank you so much, T-Boy, for bringing all that together. And I saw that comment from that person in the chat stating, but again, it's a two sides to the coin. So what if a president and incumbent declare themselves the winner, like we've seen, then they got sworn in, wherein the elections results are not, validated by the established institution. So that's a food for thought as well. So depending on how you look at it. Who wants to have a first bite on those questions or comments? All right, Susan, I'll give you, Professor Blake, just 1 second. Let me give Susan an opportunity here. Go ahead, Susan.
All right, just quickly, I have a few things to say. In response to the question, so have they not yet declared a winner? Right. Let me, as an American, tell you what I know about what's going on. We don't have a NEC. We don't have a National Electoral Commission that says we verify that this is the winner, right? We rather have lots of different state governments. And all of those state governments have declared who won the election, right? So we know that Biden should be the winner, right? We still have the Electoral College has to meet in person. So that's the next, well, I guess maybe now it'll be on Zoom, but that's the next part of the process, that all of the states send their electors. Electors are supposed to be bound by the results of the election. And then that's the moment when the official sort of pronouncement is made. But always before this president, the loser has conceded, usually the night of the election or sometimes the next morning, right? That's not a law, that's been a norm. That's been an informal agreement that the person who lost concedes the election. And this is why I said in my earlier statements, what we've lost is some of these conventions and some of these norms that we took to be institutions that it turns out are not institutions. And so in a sense, it's our own belief in our informal norms that has kind of let us down. It's never been but it's never been an issue before. This is the first time this norm has been tested for us. On the issue of swearing in people immediately, I think it's been important in the past that there's this time in between for the incoming president to plan, to figure out who's going to be the cabinet members, to have a smooth transition period, right? Normally, the norm is that both the outgoing and incoming president will get briefings from the government and will work together to ensure a smooth transition. And normally that takes time. So that's the way we've done it in the past. Again, this election is throwing everything into disarray because everything's different.
So, Susan, just quickly to ask, just to provoke the conversation a little bit more, is this system, it worked before. There has not been any major concern. But from what we've seen now, it's like typically what you refer to as power vacuum in Africa. And in Africa, for example, if you had that same system wherein the military has so much interest in, politics in government, they will step into, declare themselves the rulers. So, and for me, that has been my concern. These 70 odd days, there's a vacuum. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
Well, in the past, as I said, it's been a norm. So it's been sort of a gentleman's agreement. And it's also rested on the institution of strong distinction between civil and military arena, right? So the military has been very insistent that they not take a political position.
Right.
And that's just an informal norm. That's an institution. There's not really a law that makes that happen. And so I think that's why we're nervous and jittery in the United States, because we're seeing exactly how fragile these institutions are, institutions that we've been brought up to believe in very strongly.
Alhaji Samsu, do you think that's something America can learn from Africa, at least possibly establish, formal institutions that, to avoid situations like this?
First of all, we are changing this topic from looking at what African government can learn to give an analysis of the American election. I don't think that's what we're here for. I mean, I think as Dr. Blake was getting for. No, I agree. When you sit down and listen to somebody like Dr. Blake saying that he's getting frustrated, okay, I'm getting frustrated because how can we be so wrong when 80% of our population live in poverty?
Exactly.
And then the same poor people are celebrating the thugs who stole all the money from the country. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
When you see people dancing for somebody who has been charged for embezzlement, he came out to go to the court and they are dancing and celebrating it where you don't even have a bread to eat in the morning. That's why I said we need to unbrainwash our population. We need to educate our people. The power doesn't belong to the individual or the government. The power should belong to the people. And
how do you suggest we do that?
We have to educate our people. Let them know.
Okay.
Believe me, this so-called civil society that we have that are running up and down the continent, they have a job to do. Their job is to go out there and let the ordinary people know what is your right when you vote for Mr. X and what is your right when you vote for this political party. Like Cecil said, our parties are one of the most political parties divide our continent or each country so bad. Look at Sierra Leone. Either you be a Mende and support SLPP or you be a Timini Limba and support APC. We that are in between, we have no place. I mean, that is wrong. We have to let our people understand that, hey, again, I don't like what I'm seeing in this country right now, but believe me, I have to give them one credit that still government is functioning. Like you said, Juma, you don't see any military government coming on TV and say, hey, listen, we are monitoring what you guys are doing. We're getting ready to take on. That nonsense doesn't happen. I think our people, the populace of Africa, must stand up and take the power back from these so-called politicians or this political elite, these kleptomanias who are killing our people. Because how can you, my goodness, have a house cost millions of dollars in Africa, and when you take 5 steps out of your house, you see people lying in the street, they don't have food to eat? What kind of conscience do you have? What kind of human being are we dealing with? So to me, and I believe one thing, the politicians will not give up. You have hundreds lining up now to go occupy the position that the old ones are living. So they're not going to give up. They are manufacturing people standing by. The masses have, I hate violence. That's part of I don't like violence. But believe me, we are pushing our people to the wall when it will come to a time when it will be sad, but it will end up in the wrong way that you expected. I mean, the funny, again, before I close, the irony of it all is, take Sierra Leone, for example. They will come after me and you, who came from America, who worked so hard to build our house back home. They will come after us, try to steal from us, and they steal from their own people who stole all their money in their various governments. Right. It is one, So I think our people, the bulk is we need to do something with the masses of Africa in order for them to improve their condition. That's my point.
Wow. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ann. The issue has been highlighted of, the impact of poverty, and so many other things that I know you're, particularly interested in, and how that's, how politics affects particularly health and, and issues like that. So what do you want to comment in relation to this, the conversation and some of the questions that came through?
First, I'm thinking about this idea of an entrenched political class. And we have it here. And it's true in several, at least, of the African countries that I know well. I can't speak for all. But you wind up with this entrenched political class who has a vested interest in keeping things the way they are, because their families get money from it, they get jobs, their tribe, all of that. And I have to think, I'm trying to remember if it was Marx or Engels who basically predicted that as a problem, that you wind up with this political class that's a middle class, and they don't have any real interest in the health of the poor, and they just allow the billionaires to exist, probably because they get money from it. So, I mean, that's kind of a tight issue. But let me talk about health. When we talk about this type of poverty, and the UN has actually said through their Millennium Development Goals that we are alleviating poverty. I just do not believe it. I don't buy the numbers. I would love to think that poverty was lessening across the globe, but I do not believe their data for many reasons. But poverty is directly related to health, but so is inequality. So it turns out that where you have more inequality, you also have worse health, as well as when you have a lot of poverty. So poor people die younger. They're more likely that their babies die, that women die in childbirth. And this is a serious, serious issue that, I don't know, it's really the struggle of our time to understand how we can just get to the bottom of it and alleviate poverty. I mean, we go in with these little single programs like, okay, we're going to educate women about prenatal care. Well, by itself, that's just nothing. It's a good idea, maybe, but it has to be integrated into policy and into structure and infrastructure in a big way if you want to say that you're going to reduce maternal mortality, which is totally, completely preventable under the right circumstances. But in poverty, it's not. So if we reduce poverty, guess what we're also reducing? Lives lost to malaria, lives lost in pregnancy, lives lost to children under the age of 5, traffic injuries, on and on and on. So that's sort of my rant, if you will.
Okay. Well,
I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, because the reason I asked, because if we just say in poverty, we want to see the impact of, the role of politicians, the role of government in deepening poverty, and that affects everyday people. Just like Alhaji Sam should say, your vote matters. You're not just voting because you've been handed $1 or 5,000 leons, but you're voting because it impacts you directly. So if you don't know what you're voting for, or what that impact will create, like the United States, for example, because we're talking about lessons learned. People voted in 2016, did not know or some people knew and deliberately voted for President Trump. And today we're talking about division. In the United States, possibly that's like a foreign concept for a lot of people. No one will want to believe that America is that divided. But that's what voting for someone that possibly believe different may bring to your country, to your community, to your society, and to your household. I'll go to Professor Blake, because he opened the can of worms, talking about all the impact. You have the questions. I know you wanted to make a comment earlier. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, again, I want to thank Anne, because she has given me another segue to the discussion. You're talking about inequality and health. And it is so evident in this country, isn't it? In the United States. Look at the people who are dying of COVID. Isn't it poor people?
Yep. Much higher rates among poor people.
Exactly. So again, this is why we have to study systems in their entirety. We have to study systems in their entirety. And Africans have not taken the time to understand what these systems represent. In this kind of dispensation, you're going to have, in fact, what is increasingly becoming a permanent underclass. Those people are not even going to be able to move to a lower class status. That's the nature of this ideology. That's the nature of this system. This is how it has existed since what? Over 200 years. And intermittently, amendments are made. Intermittently. And see how difficult it is to make amendments to the US Constitution. It is not easy. The ratification process is very, very stiff. So, again, I come to us. Shamsuddin is talking about educating us. Okay? The education, to my mind, yes, involves voting, but it involves also who you are. You see, when you look at what is going on in China, and I'm not saying we should replicate it because I don't believe in just taking external prescriptions. Confucianism is paraded not just in China. They are now having Confucian institutes in various parts of the world, including the United States. Not too far from my office at the University of Pittsburgh was the Confucian Institute. Okay? Why am I saying that? Because there is a collective ethos that makes the Chinese Chinese.
You know, so there's a Confucius Institute at Corbeil as well.
Okay, it cultivates a kind of pride that would not let you become so susceptible to external prescriptions. And there's a classic example, Mao Zedong. You know, he was a socialist, but he did not take the socialist template advocated by Marx and Lenin, where the proletariat would lead the revolution. No. He had a mass of people that were poor, and it was the masses that did that. He adjusted it because it was consistent with certain aspects of Confucianism. Okay? We have a very long-standing communalism, not communism, where the community is really the source. The community should succeed. We live in communal settings. But we have abdicated from that because of what? Rugged individualism. And you talked about these politicians who are, you know, just getting all kinds of money. Yeah? Shamsuddin, you talked about people building $5 million homes and then just 5 yards or so, you see extreme poverty. Because as Africans, we have not used enough time to teach ourselves about ourselves. There is a corollary of Confucianism in Africa. It's called Martian ethics. I challenge you. I challenge one African leader, maybe one or two might know. This is like Confucianism. Martian ethics tells us who we are. And if you understand it, you will not have this kind of abuse of power. You will not suppress speech, because within that ethics, free speech is allowed. So it's a matter of the African not knowing the treasure he has or she has, from which they could extract an ideology that will push us forward. Finally, we have this notion about democracy. We make a dichotomy between democracy and a dictatorship, right? You hear people saying, oh, you know, these people, these Africans, you know, we don't want a dictatorship, we want democracy. It's such a foolish dichotomy. See what is happening right now in the United States. Could you take away the stamp of dictatorship from the White House right now? For the past 4 years, the compromising of institutions, could you take it away? So, you know, this system is malleable and it is subject to dictators taking power. This is what has happened. Trump is manifesting all aspects of what a dictator represents. Rugged individualism over and above collective ethos. So what we have to learn from here, if we go back to this, what do we learn from here? We need to know ourselves better. We need to know ourselves. Know thyself before you try to interact with others. Okay?
Thank you so much, Professor Blake. All right. Thank you so much. Let me go to, I see Tibo has been, wanting to say something. Then I'll come back to Susan. Hopefully we want to see what Professor Blake is stating here. Is it okay for Africans to look from within, design their own systems, their own form of democracy? Or
not form of democracy. No. Let me stop you. It's not form of democracy. Why? Okay. Why could it be a form of democracy? I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm not saying form of democracy. Okay. I'm saying a system that they can devise for themselves.
Devise themselves. Right. Thank you.
We don't need to christen them with external labels.
Okay, I'll come back to you anyway. I'll hear you on that as well. So, I just want you to think about that while after Tiboy's contribution. Go ahead, Tiboy, quickly.
Interestingly, the discussion is actually changing dimension and coming back to dimension. But few things I want to comment on will be one, Mr. Shamsu mentioned people in Africa or in Sierra Leone specifically don't know the value of their vote, but I think they do. Because every Sierra Leonean now know the essence of what his or her vote means. And they've always been saying to you, when you give me what I want, I can give you my vote. So basically, the value of the vote is what I have concerns over, because if Africans or Sierra Leoneans actually value their vote and believe in their vote making a difference in society, I think we'll be able to vote in the right people. But it's all based now on sectionalism, tribalism, party colors and all that stuff. So we don't really vote for ideologies and systems that will work for everybody. We'll vote for people that we know for self-interest. I think the education on that aspect will have to be interest of everybody instead of self-interest, because politics to me, as far as I'm concerned,
we keep talking about education is, for me, what kind of education we're talking about and the how and who is going to lead that education as well for the general interest. So there are so many things, but it's just a question. Go ahead.
Well, I think the education that we're talking about is self-taught, because if you know the value of who you are, then you'll be able to value what your vote is going to go into.
Okay.
So that is one aspect. And what amazes me most in this American election is the fact that Americans actually demonstrate exactly what Africans are doing in terms of winning election. Every state in America came out to celebrate. They have music systems on the road. They have people dancing.
They have their pot covers.
They have their pot covers. So it's an exact replica of what happens in Africa. And when I saw that, I was really amazed to think, wow. So is the dynamics of African political system changing over to what the Americans are practicing now? It is amazing.
Julia, let me tell you something. I predicted this will happen to my family almost 3 months before the election. That this will be the first time where people will come out in the street in celebration if they defeated Trump. I predicted it and it came true. Why? Because the people, the masses are just fed up. And believe me, that's the power. Again, like I said before, I know what Dr. Blake was talking about. The education I'm talking about is let our people know who they are. Just like Dr. Blake said. Let them know, because when you know who you are, some idiots will not come and tell me to vote for you when I know you haven't done anything for me for the past 5 years. You even think twice before you come to me.
Right.
But when you don't know who you are, you don't know your value. And then your vote becomes useless. You just vote for anybody who don't even mean anything to you. That's my point.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll come to Susan, but before that, I just wanted to say we talked about, the issue of freedom of speech or, people expressing themselves. I did not know how deeply people were scared to talk, to communicate, to even send messages on Facebook or sometimes on the phone, wanting to discuss something relating to American politics, but they are scared to mention particular names, like the name of the president, but please don't say his name, that man. So that shows how, things have gone bad. And now people feel liberated. So I can understand why the pot covers, all sorts of the African way of celebrating came out. So over to you, Susan.
Yeah, just a few final thoughts.
Right.
Mostly in response to what others have been saying. I completely agree that Africans need to understand themselves and appreciate themselves, appreciate their institutions. As I said, as a way to resist pressure from outsiders who come in claiming that they have a better way, right? I mean, what somebody said early on, if you let them build your institutions, then they will control you. Yeah, and I believe that valorizing existing Sierra Leonean institutions is a way forward, right? Knowing ourselves means knowing the existing institutions that maybe the outside doesn't see, doesn't understand, doesn't appreciate, and depending on them, building on them, right? Rather than always denigrating what Sierra Leone has and always looking for that something new. I completely agree with that. And in fact, the book project that I'm working on now is about Sierra Leonean, what I call fractal sovereignty, that talks about multiple different sources of authority, from the very local to the national to the international. And that leads me back to something else I wanted to say earlier when you were talking about in the Gambia, when ECOWAS came and stood at the border and sort of said, we're watching, it made me think, well, who could do that to Donald Trump today? Is there a regional organization that could come and stand at the border of the US and say, Donald Trump, we're looking at you? No, there isn't. And so there's sovereignty and then there's sovereignty. Not all sovereignties are the same, right? And so I think we need to understand, as we were talking about a different form of government, I think we need to even unpack this idea of national sovereignty and the idea that, a country can vote for its leader and determine its own way, when in fact sovereignty is something that's very unevenly distributed, very hierarchical throughout the international system. And I think it's connected to our point about valorizing Sierra Leonean institutions and ways of being political. Because if we can understand a sovereignty that's very local, like how are things decided in the Court Barry? How are things decided at that level? And think about that as governance. And as we rightly say, not necessarily calling it democracy, but calling it ethical, just Sierra Leonean governance.
Okay. Thank you so much. And Anne, what do you have to say? Do we have to look from within, like Professor Blake has been advocating, and design a system that works for that particular country, or still mirror it to the greatest democracy in the world as we've known the United States, for example?
Fascinated with Professor Blake's comment that it's not a dichotomy. So it's not just democracy versus authoritarian.
Right.
There's a continuum, right? And I think that it's striking me that different contexts, different countries need to think about or could need to consider other points on the continuum that might be really good mixes and might be something completely fresh and new that works differently and better. That would be exciting. So I have that thought, and that sort of relates, I think that echoes somewhat what Susan said, what Professor Shepler said. But it's also making me think about the comment about Confucianism. Oh, I know, and Professor Shepler's comment about what is just. So sometimes I did a project with my students a couple of years ago to decide, what do we mean when we say social justice? We want social justice. We all agree it's a good thing, right? What the heck do we mean?
All right. So many questions, like our panelists have been saying, that possibly it's not just looking at the question itself, it brings a whole lot more to discuss. All right. We'll get back to you now, Professor Blake.
Yes, just a quick, just a quick follow-up to some of the comments that have been made. What's the name of the brother that was talking? What's his name?
T-Boy.
T-Boy. Okay. T-Boy made a very interesting observation about voting patterns, which, people should vote not necessarily for the party, etc., but for people who are competent. I think that was the bottom line. But I want to bring him back to comments made. I believe, Susan, I'm not picking on you, by the way. I'm learning from you. Your comments are really triggering a lot of things in my mind. Recollect that you said, when we were talking about the 70 million plus people, the way who voted for Trump, and the way you broke it down was that, not all of them support Trump as Trump, but because they habitually have voted what? Republican. You remember you said that.
Dan said that.
Yes, you said that, right? And yes, now that is the problem. Because that's part of the, if I can use the word, the zombification of this kind of system. If that would exist, if I coin it. Because when you have this kind of setup, we become zombified. It is in Sierra Leone. All right, I'll never forget. We were on the campaign trail, and along the street, you'll see people hold the palm tree like that, regardless of who. They'll say "Top Boy" forever. It's not the individual; it is Top Boy. Top Boy is the palm tree. Then the other people will have the red sun. It is not the individual; it is the red sun. Okay, so this is how our value systems have been corrupted. Really, and I'm saying this really, I can even say from authority, because I have a book that was published a few years ago called The African Origins of Rhetoric. And in that book, I traced Mahathian ethics and demonstrated how Mahathian ethics can inform governance. And I even showed examples from African literature. There is a book called Caught in the Storm. Seydou Badian is a Malian. When you read those books, you will see how African systems of governance functioned. I'm not saying that we should just replicate lock, stock, and barrel. No. Just like what Anne said just now, we look at what? A continuum. Look at a continuum. And from there, we begin to build. So really, I've really learned during this session, because it reinforces the divisiveness of this ideology and the dangers involved in really creating a very dangerous situation like we have now. Very, very, very dangerous situation that we have now. Okay? There is no ECOWAS military. I think Susan said it just now. In fact, the presence of the ECOWAS forces, I hated it because it contravened democratic governance. It contravened it. If we are saying that we are democracies, don't bring in the military to threaten somebody to leave. Don't. And I'm so scared. You notice what is going on with the Department of Defense right now here? Secretary of Defense is gone. So many other people. But this system is strong enough not to allow that to happen. Yes, and I can conclude my sentence by saying this. I will defend American democracy to the hilt as long as it is in America. I am firmly committed to the preservation of American democracy for Americans. We should not be in a situation where we are in right now in this country. Okay, we should not. And I have no problem with the 70 days because that is what it is. That is what it is. This is, yeah, it is the norm. It takes that long for the transition to go on. And in so many ways, it makes sense. And I will defend this democracy to the hilt, because I hate to see its demise. I hope to God it doesn't collapse in this country. But when it comes to exportation, that's where I draw the line.
Thank you so much. So, viewers, we see your comments been coming in, questions, but we're not going to be able to go back to all of those. We're going to round up now because our panelists are very busy. They've, spent 2 quality hours with us. So we're going to appreciate that for today and hopefully have them as a group or as individuals as we move forward. So I'm going to ask them to round up. In your rounding up statements, let's look again at the topic where we started. And also, I would like us to tie it with, since we started, it's only but fair, say the American system, is there any hope for Africa with a Biden government? So in your roundup. So I would like you to take that into consideration with the initial, the topic that we have, and then looking into the future. Like Anne say, we have to remain optimistic. Is Susan there? Is she left? I think Susan dropped off. Well, let's start with Alhaji Samsu then. What would be your rounding up statements with those two, the initial question and looking forward?
Thank you very much, Juma. And let me take this opportunity to thank all of you and, of course, the panelists. This is a very lively discussion. I mean, so many things I've been thinking about in the past is coming to fruition right now. As a matter of fact, I was listening to Dr. Blake when he was saying that I love American democracy for America. I always say that to people. Whatever is in America is good for the Americans. We have to make sure we find something that is good for us. I tell people that when you go, especially when you go into Africa on vacation, leave New York at New York airport. You're not going to get New York in Freetown Airport and Lungi. My point is, we as Africans must try to take our responsibility for ourselves. I remember somebody was talking about the activities of the United Nations. Let me tell you something that happened to me in Somalia in 1994. We were in a very remote town, and they used to supply us various items for food and things like that. Can you believe that they will come from Somalia to Texas to purchase meat to sell for us in Somalia, while you can go to Kenya and get meat? But you see, these are the advantages that the US get, because they claim that they donate so much money at the UN, but they don't tell people how much benefit they get from the UN. Now, these institutions are not owned by, our role there is very minimal. The powers play to those institutions. And because even our ECOWAS and all this group, believe me, I don't know how much their own beliefs portray their identity, whether they get influenced by international community, but I believe that. So right now, again, I'm not saying that we should put our population in classrooms, but let us educate them within our own quality, our own values that we have. And as far as America is concerned, believe me, you see, a lot of people get disappointed when Barack Obama came to power and they were thinking that Africa is going to be paved with gold. I remember at that time I was going to Sudan, and I went to get some inoculation, and one of the nurses at the UN office told me, and she's an Ethiopian, and she was so happy. She said, when Obama came, Africa will be better. I said, why do you think Africa will be better because of Obama? Why can't we find our own leader that can make us better? And we have an argument. I said, you know what, let's just forget about it. Now we are even thinking that Biden is going to give us gold. We don't ask Biden to give us gold. Just show us how we can get the gold. Let us stop depending on these people to solve our problem for us. Our people are capable. We have talent in Africa. We have, I saw a couple of weeks ago, I saw a young boy created a radio by himself, going to the garbage, pick up items and put it together and make a radio that you can hear the broadcast from even BBC thing. Why can't we use that boy, nurture him, and put him in a situation whereby he can at least make Sierra Leone develop electronically? Those are the type of item we have so much in Sierra Leone, in Africa, that we have engineers who don't even know how to fix roads because they have never gone there. We have agriculture institute and all the time, never goes to the farm. Come on. I mean, my hope is that Biden will pay well, of course, Donald Trump didn't care about us anyway, so he just dumped us on the garbage. I hope we can get some interest. I like some of the things that I'm hearing from Kamala and from Biden and surrogates all over the place, but I don't want us to put all our eggs in Biden's basket because he has a big burden here. He has so much here that he has to work on. Let us try to take our responsibility for ourselves. And if, like we say back home, a person they touch you back, you know they complain, say they go far. Okay, we cannot say the work. Let us do for us what we're capable of doing. And if Biden come on the way to help us, we thank God. We thank that. We'll accept that. But if we say I'm looking forward that they will be at least open to us. Not that they will give us all what we want, but at least they will open to us to make sure we have what is ours and help us to build our society to be a better society. That's why I will end it.
All right, thank you so much, Alhaji Samsu. We appreciate you, and for that closing, I'll go straight to Susan, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Earlier I had an internet issue. Even in the US, we have internet issues. I think mostly I'll respond to the question of what U.S. policy towards Africa will be. I mentioned that in my opening remarks, but I think, as I said, we'll be back to what the Obama presidency did. So very similar kind of democracy promotion, even despite the fact that we've just been arguing that perhaps democracy promotion is not what is needed in Africa. I think the U.S. is very invested in that way of thinking. I mean, certainly any Secretary of State that Biden picks will be better than Pompeo. And all of the institutions like USAID, CDC, all the U.S. organizations, I think, that interact with Africa will be better funded. But the one thing that I think may be different since Obama is, as I said earlier, the more of a proxy war over soft power with China, because I see China's interventions in Africa really ramping up. And I think we're likely to see that as a threat. And that will motivate us even more than our alleged, humanitarian impulses in Africa. And just finally, Una, thank you for allowing me to join this conversation.
Thank you. We say glad we forget you, and we appreciate you, and we'll call you back at some point. We appreciate you coming in and sharing your opinion and your thoughts on this conversation. Over to you, Professor Ann.
Thank you. I largely echo Susan's, Professor Shepler's comments. I don't think we're going to see radical change, but what we're going to see is good change. I think I should make a disclaimer that in 2008, I worked with the Biden campaign that failed in one state. So I'm supportive. That's my disclaimer. I think a Biden presidency portends a better era marked by increased interest in globalization, global issues, a re-engagement by the US internationally, and key to this support for global health. I'm impressed that his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, has visited Sierra Leone in 2014, and she also visited Zambia and the DRC. I think we can anticipate a renewed emphasis on development, women's empowerment, education for girls, and prevention of violence against women. And I think we can anticipate new vigorous approaches to addressing the COVID pandemic, climate change, and global development. We can certainly see that there will be improved engagement in the world by rejoining the WHO, which was just crazy that we would leave it, and working in a diplomatic, appropriate way with the UN, the EU, ECOWAS, etc. And I think we'll see, like Susan said, probably basically a return to Obama-esque policies, but better funding of USAID resources, including Fulbright, Peace Corps, and fundamentally the CDC. So I want to thank you very much. I'm very humbled by being with this group, and thank you.
Thank you so much. I will go to Professor Blake and then the CIGM media team. Then I'll ask you if you can stay when we go offline just for a quick debrief if you have time. If not, then I'll follow up with you. Over to you, Professor Blake.
Oh, thank you very much again, for organizing this panel. Going to the original question, what can we learn? Let me just say, we are not a tabula rasa. We're not a blank slate. We're not there to be written on, to be told this is what you have to do, this is ABC. We are resourceful, we are intelligent. It's just that we have not been using our intelligence the way we should do it. I am open to the meeting of ideas, definitely, very open to that, but not to a situation where my mind is supposed to be subjected to the whims and caprices of people who believe they can write on it. I have a mind, okay? And African agency should be respected. But African agency can never be respected because of the way we are projecting ourselves right now. So we are our own worst enemies in terms of cultivating respect for us as people, or respect for us as leaders, because we are not showing that we can think to lead. So lessons, maybe this is not how we should behave. That's the only lesson. We should not be like what Trump is doing, but people are doing it anyway. This is what so many of the African governments are doing, what Trump is doing. Maybe he's learning from them. I don't know, from these people who are behaving this way. And I hope he doesn't learn from ECOWAS, where they will bring troops, around the Mexican border or the Canadian border to threaten him if he doesn't move, that they would move him away. Let me finally close with just a quick observation, right?
Yeah.
And this observation is on moral authority. And what do I mean by that? When you look at history, we are now being taught the importance of rights, right? We're now being taught the importance of freedom. I'm saying this deliberately, but it is not too long ago in terms of history that we were subjugated, we were muzzled during the colonial era. Historically, 60 years is nothing in terms of that kind of situation. We were never allowed to express ourselves. We were imprisoned when we did. We were locked up, we were killed in East Africa, for example, the Mau Mau. So really, what is the moral authority for this part of the world to talk to us about rights, to talk to us about freedom? And the reality is, in our own ethos, in our own histories, in our own philosophies, we discuss issues of right. We discuss issues of freedom. The problem is, a lot of our leaders are not familiar with that history, because they are so ready to copy. I'm not a biblical scholar or anything like that, but I think there's a section in the Bible that says, cast down your nets where you are, or something. I don't know the exact verse, but because I'm not that way inclined. But I know that there is something there that says, cast down your net where you are. Fish bakusa ide. You go take your net to Korea far away. So I hope Africa would learn to look and say, hey, maybe, yes, we can coexist. We can relate in terms of international relations. But thanks and no thanks. Let me find my way.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that very much from all our panelists. And I'll just go quickly to the CIGM Media team. Mr. T-Boy, I'll start with you, then to Obafemi Pama, then I'll close.
Thank you very much to the panelists, and we are proud of you actually giving us your time to be here tonight. We know you are all on busy schedules, and at the same time, you're worrying about the American elections and what is going to happen next with people living in America. But it also affects people living all over the world, especially people from Sierra Leone. And my own take would be just a few things I want to highlight. As Africans, we are not going to be kids for the rest of our lives, because basically that's how exactly some of we Africans are behaving all over the world. And we grown up to be adults, and even sometimes we challenge our parents to say we want to be independent to do things for ourselves. So I think African leaders should be in the position to be able to look after its people. Basically, if we cannot look after ourselves as Africans, we will forever remain to be kids. And nobody wants to be a kid in their life. You always want to grow up and be successful in everything that you're doing. And you want to be proud to say, I did it. So as Africans, and our leaders should also be in the position to be able to rule, to be in the position to be able to look after the people that they govern, because we cannot live on donor-funded nation for the rest of our lives as Africans. I think to create a reverse psychology, if donors stop feeding us with their donor funds, I think we possibly will be able to manage our resources. Because if a child is continuously going to be fed by their parents who have money, that child is definitely not going to be in the position to earn for themselves, because he will rely on the parental wealth that he grew up with. So as Africans, we should be in the position to be positive role models in terms of fetching for ourselves and looking after our families. So if we have that proud nature within ourselves as a nation, we should be able to replicate that. So I will say thank you for the education that we've already acquired from the great panel that we have today, full of philosophers and professors and people who have actually spent enough time in the diaspora, and also people who are in the diaspora, in reference to Anne and Susan, that have spent enough time also in Africa. I think it's great to have you guys on board, sharing those two experiences. I think learning from you guys tonight is going to open the eyebrows of so many Sierra Leoneans who are watching this program tonight, and be able to rationalize exactly what are the discourse in terms of the differences that we both share from both continents. It is a great pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you, as Juma said, individually, because there are so many other issues that we possibly might want to discuss on a one-to-one basis. Specifically to Professor Blake, I think you have enough resources and experiences for the past 20 years in terms of political dispensation in Sierra Leone. We likely will have you back again, and also the rest of the panelists in different areas of their parts, so that we'll be able to elaborate on some of the issues that you are quite experts on. So it's a pleasure to have you, and hope to see you guys individually soon on a Zoom in. Over to you, Juma.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Femi Pama. The quiet man behind this.
Hi, Juma. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Yes, I'm going to echo the statements of my colleagues, Juma and T-Boy, and I'm sure most of our listeners in thanking our panel today. You guys have been extraordinary. You have given us a lot to think about, taught us a lot. And we hope that some of the points that we've shared with you as well, you could take away, think about it, and see what more advice you could provide for us in the future when we call you back, as the guys have actually asked. I would like to make a couple of points here. From a youngish African living in the diaspora, in the UK in my case, it was good seeing the American elections. You know, with all the problems it's had, I think one of our panelists actually said the institutions that they have will not allow a miscarriage of justice, if I can put it that way. We all know what the people voted for, and no matter how the powers above try to change stuff, we believe that the institutions in America will not allow that to happen. That's the one thing I would like African leaders to listen and learn from. They might be in power today, but there's going to come a day when they're going to be in opposition. And I hope that they learn from what's happening now, that they put measures in place for building these infrastructures so that when they're in opposition and they're looking to take over the incumbent, there is structures in place to allow them to do so without a dictator stopping that process happening. So that's one wish I have in the topic that we're talking about today. I'd like our governments in Africa to learn. But
Right.
I was going to make one more statement, if you permit.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You know, I've spent quite a lot of time in Sierra Leone, and it bugs me how when you talk to the youths, there's only 3 career paths. Everybody wants to be a footballer. Everybody wants to be a politician, president, or minister. And lastly, everybody wants to work for the United Nations. It's crazy, I know, but it's going back to what people are saying is, I think for me, it's lack of education. There's loads of other good career paths, but we see that these are the financial or the quick gains, should I say. If you're a footballer, God's given you the talent. You know, you can go abroad and make quite a lot of money. If you're a politician, you can make money. I'm not going to say in which ways, but you know, I'm sure you can all think on the route I'm trying to go. And if you're in the UN as well, because we see them driving all the nice, you know, 4x4s, the off-road cars, and you know, they live in the nice posh houses. You know, it is so sad that we have doctors, teachers, nurses, and you name it, that can't afford a living wage. So I'm hoping that our leaders above can look at the West, no matter all the turmoil America's going through at the moment, look at the infrastructure that they have in place, where the kids in these countries don't have to just aspire for those positions. There's plenty of the positions that they know that if they can get there, they will be able to provide a good living for their families. I'll say that for now. And again, thanks to all of our guests for watching with us, and thanks for all of our panelists for sharing their knowledge with us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Femi. And to our viewers, we say thank you very much. And our panelists, I'll just join and say thank you very much. More so that we reached out to you at short notice. My own comment would be, you know, we put out the question just to provoke conversation. And at least, you know, it left us with more questions that we need to dig deep into and try to understand and learn from. So it involves more research. I just want to say a few things here. That firstly, majority of Africans, particularly in Sierra Leone, we have this belief that what is West is best. So we've seen that it's not always the case. So that's one lesson I would say we'll learn from this. Again, the second lesson possibly I'll take away from this, as bad as things are or have been for the past 4 years, at least they have institutions or some form of systems as safeguards that protected and ensured democracy survived. So that's a good thing. like Femi stated, that we have to build these institutions and strengthen them. Not necessarily, getting a template from the Western shelf and bring it in. We have to adapt what works for us. Again, it's been clear here that your vote matters, your vote counts, and your vote can make a whole lot of difference in the way of life, in your aspirations, in everything that you want to do, and the people that govern you. That's what it shows. If it was not for the great turnout, though it's low, as Susan highlighted, compared to Sierra Leone, but if it was not for that greater voter turnout, we would have been singing a different song today. Mm-hmm. That's another lesson. You where they watch me, if you feel say you vote not count, don't take it for granted. It's important. Another lesson for our leaders and people in government is this. Do not spend 5 years, 4 years, or 7 years in government when you win to start thinking how to rig the next elections or how to stifle the process. Spend more time in providing what the people need, what you promised, and then they will re-elect you. President Trump, for example, has all the connections. He called all the media fake news, which I know has been a pattern for most African governments now. They are propagandists calling everything that's, people challenge as fake news, as false. But he did not succeed because the people got fed up, because he failed to deliver, particularly with the COVID. When they needed him most to step up, he did not. So the people showed that, at the polls. They went and voted to say, no, we're not going to endorse you for a second term. So you president, you government, spend time in providing good health care, water supply, take care of the women and children, and provide opportunities for people to go into the business world, start up their, small businesses. Then they will consider to re-elect you. That's what will be my own take from this if I'm going to take lessons from it. So as always, we say thank you very much. Join us tomorrow on the Health Show. We're going to be discussing the ABCs of prostate cancer. And then we're going to be again live with you next week. And I think we have a program on Saturday. We're going to go into the entertainment sector on Saturday. We have a young Sierra Leonean artist who's been sensitizing his community, mostly in the eastern part of Freetown, Sierra Leone. And it's nice to bring them out because he's just not singing, but he's using music to educate and communicate things that affect everyday.
Please, when is that? When is that?
On Saturday. Yeah, Saturday, sir.
What time?
They say 3 p.m. U.S. Standard, right? U.S. Eastern Time. T-Boy?
Okay, so now 12 o'clock with time now.
Yeah, 12 o'clock your time. So
you know that you talk to so?
Sorry?
My career, I was a full-time entertainer.
That's the master of the music sound in Sierra Leone during our days.
So you see, we've learned something new about
full-time. I was lead vocalist of the Golden Strings Band.
Golden Strings Band, yeah.
You will see my records. You will see me name this. Cecil Blake, leader. A very popular band. Shamsu, ask her. So I would like to hear that musician.
All right, thank you so much. Well,
encourage them. Say, they could become anything,
Right.
Yes.
Cecil is an all-rounder, man. All-rounder. Cecil is all-rounder.
Professor Blake today that he's not just an academic, but he was a full-time musician as well.
Full-time.
Right.
5 years of my life.
So on that note, I would say thank you again. And we're going to go off here and so spend 2 minutes to debrief with our panelists before they leave.
All right.
Good night.
Becoming students for tomorrow's world.
Our aim is to teach our pupils to be creative, critical thinkers, to be innovative, and to become the new entrepreneurs of Sierra Leone and Africa, moving the African continent beyond the 21st century.
Jobs are going to change. The nature of work is going to fundamentally change.
We realize companies are starting to hire on skills and not degrees.
Currently, I'm a self-taught coding beginner. I develop websites and basic applications. I've been interested in science and technology since I was 11. An up-to-date STEM lab gives us what we need, the tools, motivates us to do more.
The Scholarship and Innovation Working Group from Old Boys Association has been working with both Reverend Canon Ken Davis and Canon Lashite to see how they can increase science and STEM at the school.
STEM is important because pupils can learn how to solve real-world situations and pursue careers in web development, artificial intelligence, robotics, chemical engineering, and the sky is the limit to what a pupil can do.
So a vision for the future entails computing capability that would create a STEM innovation lab to provide all students with practical, engaging, and self-learning opportunities to gain digital skills.
One of the use of the microbit is to test for science experiments. In the case of agricultural science, we want to test for the soil. You can download information about the type of soil on your computer, and then you take the microbit, download information on the microbit.
STEM gives us the knowledge, gives us the capacity. With the science, the technology, engineering, and mathematics, it helps you to be able to prepare for the future, to be able to earn your place in the future workplace.
The coding club is new, and we only have a few members for now. And very soon we will have a big coding club.
Let us give the young people the tools to become critical minerals or miners of their thoughts and ideas that will develop our countries, and also for them to play their part in creating a conceivable world.
All donations are appreciated, and all funds raised will go towards the development, implementation, and management of this first of a kind digital STEM lab in Sierra Leone. Sierra Grammar School, empowering students for tomorrow's world.
When I was young, a lot of things were different. Unfortunately, most of the differences seen now are heartbreaking and are not good at all.
Before now, men were strong protectors of the weak, fathers, brothers, lovers, sons. Their mere presence guaranteed the safety of women and children.
But what do we do now?
Men harassing and raping women.
Men sexually abuse little girls.
Men battering and killing their wives.
Any form of sexual assault, be it rape, sexual abuse, or pedophilia, is a killer to human self-esteem.
Women should stop dying in silence. Speak now.
The rapist should be stigmatized, not the victim.
I think death sentence should be the consequence of such terrible act.
And you mothers, build confidence in your children, put trust in them, listen to them when they make reports, and take necessary actions.
Talking of mothers before now, women were virtuous.
They were mothers, daughters, and sisters.
Nurturing, counseling, supporting their men folks.
But now,
women are trafficking female children for money.
Women are forced to be silenced.
All this must stop, and it must stop now.
Real men do not abuse, rape, or molest women and children. It is barbaric, unacceptable.
Let all real men stand with us.
Together, let's say an emphatic no to rape, sexual abuse,
pedophilia, and domestic violence.
I was raped multiple times by my aunt's boyfriend when I was 6.
I was repeatedly raped at the age of 8 by a close family member. I was raped at 19. I didn't speak openly about it because I was ashamed and afraid that people would judge me. I was raped at age 5 by my caregiver's husband.
On June 17th, 2020, 5-year-old Khadija Sakho, a beautiful little girl from Freetown, Sierra Leone, was repeatedly raped and strangled to death, allegedly by her own cousin. Her death shocked the nation. But in truth, in this small West African country, 9 out of 10 girls experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. Think about that for a second. 9 out of 10. That's 90%. My name is Aisha Sase. I'm a journalist and activist. I'm joining forces with Idris Elba and other activists from across Sierra Leone to support the survivors of sexual violence with the Survivors Solidarity Fund. Please consider donating whatever you can afford. All monies raised will go to 4 local organizations currently providing free medical and legal services to survivors. 5-year-old Khadija lost her life to sexual violence. That same threat remains for millions of others. So this is also a call for you to use your voice, your power, to draw attention to an enduring culture of rape. Together, we must end it now. My name is Aisha Sase. I am Khadija Sakho.
I am Khadija Sakho. I am Khadija Sakho.
I am Khadija Sakho.
I am Khadija Sakho.
We are Khadija Sakho.
We are all Khadija Sakho.
Of all the crimes committed against a person, rape is the one that leaves the person feeling very violated. A rape victim is often left with the feeling that a part of them has been torn apart.
To use another person's body and ignore the souls that resides within is one of the most outstandingly shocking crimes that one person can commit against another.
Some men harass and rape their women.
Some men sexually abuse underage girls.
Some men beat and kill their wives.
Any form of sexual assault is unacceptable.
There must be consent before you act.
Being in a relationship is not consent.
If they are not sober, they can't consent.
Flirting is not a consent.
We had sex before is not consent.
Silence is not consent.
Only an informed, sober, freely given, ongoing and enthusiastic yes is consent.
Women should stop dying in silence.
A man does not become a real man by physically dominating a woman. A man becomes a real man by loving, protecting, and respecting the woman.
Real men do not rape or abuse women and children.
Let all real men stand with us. And together, let's say no to child abuse, no to domestic violence, no to all forms of rape, being it spousal rape, intimate partner rape, child sex abuse, statutory rape, date rape, serial rape, and gang rape.
We must rise up against this ugly trend. Justice for one, justice for all.
All sexual assault must stop, and it must stop now.